This is a collection of two tragic stories that illustrate the dark sides of human life. In the first story, we encounter the horrifying consequences of despair and poverty when a mother decides to kill her family to free them from poverty. In the second story, we see how desperation and fear can lead to irreversible consequences when a woman hires a special forces soldier to kill her cruel husband. Both stories serve as a reminder of how desperation and poverty can lead to unimaginable consequences. Due to poverty, she decided to murder her entire family. On December 1st, 2011, in one of the apartments in the city of Balashika, the bodies of a 48-year-old father and two underage children were found. The living but practically breathless mother of the family was found on the floor. The woman was resuscitated in the hospital. It turned out that the surviving Larisa Popok killed her entire family and tried to commit suicide, thus escaping from poverty. When the family's father, Dmitry Popkov, was 38 years old, he met Larisa, and both decided to get married and start a family. Soon a girl named Anya was born, and 2 years later, a son, Sasha. The family lived very poorly. They didn't even have enough money for food. Sometimes the grown-up children collected and handed in bottles. It should be noted that before the birth of the children, Dmitry lived in the Teplai Stan area in his apartment together with his sister. But according to friends of the Popkov family, the man's sister actually drove him out of the apartment, fraudulently rewriting the property to another person. Dmitry, out of resentment, never saw her again and did not communicate. Before the wedding, Larisa received a secondary medical education in one of the colleges of Moldova. The failed nurse more than once applied the acquired skills to her children, but not for good. Acquaintances of the married couple told that, leaving home for business or work, the woman mixed sleeping pills for her babies so that they would sleep and not cry. After 7 years of marriage, constant scandals and quarrels began in the family, and the father of the family used physical force against his wife. All this happened on a daily basis in front of the children. At this time, the man got hooked on potent drugs dimendrol, dibazole, and phenazepam. In addition, Dmitry abused alcohol. The wife did not go to the police because she was afraid of beatings from her beloved in the future. The family's father made ends meet with random earnings, and Larisa spent most of her time at home with the children. Everything that was earned went to the maintenance of the son and daughter. Many neighbors claimed that the mother had been walking away from her husband for the last few years. Allegedly, Larisa would go somewhere after her husband went to the night shift and returned home in the morning before Dmitry arrived. Despite the interesting life of the spouses and the difficult financial situation in the family, they still looked after the children, fussed over them. They went to parent meetings, took their son and daughter to the park, met them from school. But the children grew up disobedient, as they were often sent to sanatoriums on vouchers for the poor, and for a long time this was one of the ways to save the budget. The father suffered from a long, protracted depression. Tired of endless debts, loans, and random earnings, the man on his social media page, shortly before his death, asked for financial help from the indifferent, explaining this by his extremely difficult financial situation in the family. Dmitry took out loans, often to repay the previous loan. You need to take a new one. A whole financial pyramid was built. A week later, the family disappeared. According to neighbors, the noise from the children behind the wall disappeared. They were also not visible on the playground, but the mother was often observed going out to the neighboring store for alcohol and to the eyeballs drunk. Before that, Larisa did not drink alcohol at all, and even more so did not abuse it. The police arrived, broke into the apartment and found the entire family lying on the floor lifeless, except for the mother, who began to stir after some time. She was urgently taken to the hospital. After the woman came to, she confessed that 2 weeks ago she had arranged a farewell dinner for the whole family, having previously added sleeping pills to their food and vodka for her husband, after which she killed 3 of them at night. Then she tried to poison herself, but it didn't work out. Experts found in the apartment 3 bags wrapped with tape, which the mother used for the murder. The man and 2 children died. For 2 weeks their mother lived in the next room, getting drunk to oblivion, and eventually tried to say goodbye to life, swallowing a large amount of psychotropic drugs, but unsuccessfully. The murderer was sent to pre-trial detention for 2 months. According to the charge brought against her, the woman faced from 8 to 20 years in prison, and if the court did not find any mitigating circumstances for her, she would be sentenced to life. In pretrial detention, her mental state began to deteriorate rapidly, so the woman was transferred under escort to a psychiatric hospital for further treatment and observation. What is a loving mother capable of? It was hard for the judges to pronounce the sentence. Greetings. Leningrad, 1983. A woman ran into one of the police departments and begged for help in a disjointed manner, wiping away tears. Her husband was kidnapped right before her eyes. The police officers calmed her down with difficulty and asked her to tell everything from the beginning. The woman's name was Lydia Stroganova. She was a teacher, a candidate of sciences. Her husband, Leonid Stroganov, also a candidate of sciences, an engineer-inventor. Intelligentsia, in a word. A week ago, Leonid posted advertisements for the sale of a spare wheel from his Moskvich. A buyer was found almost immediately, made a deposit, but asked to deliver this wheel to his dacha. Leonid agreed. They all went to the dacha together, Leonid, Lydia, and the buyer, who was showing the way. As a result, they arrived in some remote place, and then the buyer pulled out a knife and ordered Lydia to get out of the car. Frightened, Lydia obeyed, and the car drove off. Lydia waited a long time, but her husband never returned. She made her way to the road and hitchhiked home, and from there in the morning to the police. That's the whole story. Her story caused suspicion among law enforcement officers. Why didn't Lydia immediately go to the police, to any nearest point, or at least ask for help from passing drivers? Lydia justified herself by saying that her husband was calm and not scared of the knife. In general, the woman was extremely nervous, and this caused even more suspicion among the police officers. They went to the specified place in the Leningrad region and, combing the area, found the Moskvich empty, and nearby they found the body of Leonid Stroganov. He was dealt with using a laundry rope and a sharp knitting needle. An unexpected choice of weapon. In the car and on the snow, experts were able to find traces of men's shoes of size 46. So Lydia was telling the truth. Already with the help of dogs, they followed the tracks along the winter rut. The trail led to the small historic town of Schlisselburg, then Petrokrepost. The detectives did a lot of work with the local police and selected suspects by shoe size from the databases. They also visited shops selling everything for knitting. The town is small. It didn't take much time, and one of the sellers remembered that not so long ago, one large man was interested in knitting needles, supposedly for his wife, and bought a couple. They showed her photos of the selected people, and among them she recognized the buyer, Vasily Oleshko, a Special Forces soldier. They checked him and found no connection with Leonid Stroganov. They showed his photo to Lydia Stroganova, She seemed to get nervous but did not recognize Oleshko. She said he was sitting in the back seat with a low-pulled hat and she couldn't see him properly. Oleshko was detained. Contrary to expectations, he did not resist and behaved calmly, but remained silent during the interrogation. They questioned the Special Forces soldier's girlfriend. She didn't notice anything suspicious in his behavior. She only told that Vasily had started frequenting the local library, although he was not particularly interested in books before. And yes, it turned out that the girl does not knit. So Vasily bought the knitting needles not for her. The detectives went to the library to try to find out what Vasily was looking for there. They were met by the head librarian Larissa, and one of the detectives remembered that he had already seen her in a joint photo with Lydia and Leonid Stroganov. There's the common connection. Larissa admitted that she is a friend of the Stroganov family, but that's all. After talking with Larissa, one of the investigators became interested, but not in her, but in Lydia Stroganova. He called the woman for questioning. Once again, he listened to the story about the kidnapping of her husband, saw her agitation and tears, and ordered her to be arrested. The police officers were confused by such a decision. The woman lost her husband, was left alone with 2 children. How could this be? But the order had to be carried out. Lydia Stroganova was in shock. She asked for paper and a pen to write a complaint to the prosecutor's office about the arbitrariness. And by morning she wrote, only it was not a complaint, but a sincere confession. It turned out that her husband was a family tyrant. He constantly tormented her son from her first marriage. He never accepted him and turned the boy's life into a real nightmare. For any mistake, a C in the diary, dust on the shelf, a bed not perfectly made, and so on, he could put the child on peas so that he would beg for forgiveness for hours. There was always a reason. He was constantly dissatisfied with the boy and invented new punishments. A real monster under the guise of an intelligent engineer. A month ago, her friend Larissa introduced her to Vasily Oleshko, presenting him as a police officer. Lydia was glad maybe he could reason with her out-of-control husband, to make him understand that he should be a protector of the family, not a threat to it. The sale of the wheel became a pretext for a meeting. But during the trip, the situation got out of control. Oleshko suddenly went berserk, pulled out a knife and ordered Lydia to get out of the car, and then killed Leonid. But why did the Special Forces soldier suddenly lose his temper? What was the reason that he mercilessly dealt with a stranger? The reason turned out to be a letter from Anton, Lydia's son from her first marriage. The child addressed this letter to Santa Claus, and in it he asked to be taken to an orphanage, just not to return to his stepfather. He didn't need gifts or any joys, he only asked for this. Lydia showed this letter to Vasily Oleshko in the hope that he would explain to Leonid what he had done to the child. Only the Special Forces soldier took the situation too close to heart and dealt with the tyrant in his own way. The case was transferred to the military prosecutor's office. At the trial, Oleshko was silent, and he was sentenced to 15 years of imprisonment. It seemed that the case was closed and this is the end of the story, but no. Leonid Stroganov's relatives intervened in the case. They asked the investigators to take a closer look at Lydia's role in this story. The case was transferred to the main military prosecutor's office of the USSR. An investigative experiment was conducted with the participation of Oleshko, and during the experiment, Oleshko fell apart. Inconsistencies and uncertain explanation of what happened led the investigators to think that everything was not quite as Oleshko assured. As a result, they were able to persuade Vasily to tell the truth. And it stunned the investigators. The entire plan of action was invented by Lydia Stroganova. She collected all the money, sold jewelry and antiques. An impressive amount was collected, and Lydia started looking for a performer of the plan. Her friend Larisa helped her with this. She really introduced Lydia to Oleshko. They discussed everything and Lydia hired him. Oleshko had a prosaic goal. He wanted to earn money for the upcoming wedding. They chose knitting needles as a weapon to confuse the investigation, and after the arrest, Oleshko was silent during the investigation and trial because he understood they will put him in prison anyway, so at least he will have money after being released. It's worth noting that at the moment of the execution over her husband, Lydia was in the car and calmly watched what was happening. She didn't get out. She was glad to watch her revenge for her son's suffering come to fruition. At the trial, Lydia Stroganova did not repent and only regretted that she was caught and would not be able to raise her children. The sentence for Oleshko remained in force, and Stroganova was sentenced to 7 years of imprisonment. It was difficult for the court to read the sentence. In their hearts, everyone understood the mother had still avenged her child. That's the story.